They stood in court and told the judge I was a liar, that my mother had an affair and I was never his child. I didn't cry at the funeral. Not because I wasn't grieving, but because I already knew what they were about to do. They surrounded the casket like a perfect family portrait. Except I was standing outside the frame, alone in the rain. I heard them whisper, "She's just a mistake. She doesn't belong." Then came the will, the silence, the smirks. "He left everything to his real children," my aunt announced, like she was reciting a fact too obvious to dispute. I didn't flinch. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just reached into my bag and handed the judge the DNA results. I had been waiting 6 months for that moment, and when the truth hit the room, it was louder than any scream I could have made. The sky over Lexington was gray that morning. Not stormy, not dramatic, just muted, like the whole world had agreed to go silent for my father. I stood across the street from the funeral home, staring at the black umbrellas gathering like crows. They were all there. Ethan, with his tailored suit and perfect haircut. Jessica, in her designer heels, dabbing fake tears with a silk handkerchief. And Aunt Meredith still sharp-tongued and controlling, even in grief. They hadn't seen me yet. Or maybe they had. Maybe they just chose not to. I didn't walk in right away. I waited. Let them settle. Let the narrative form without me. That's what they always did. Shape the story. Erase my name. I wasn't on the official obituary. I wasn't even mentioned in the funeral program. Beloved father to Ethan and Jessica. That was all. No Madison. No me. When I finally stepped inside, the air shifted. Not in a warm, welcoming way, but like a draft had blown in and everyone tensed. No one said hello. No one hugged me. I found a seat in the back row. Not by choice, by instinct. That's where people like me go, those who don't belong. Or rather, those who were told they never did. The pastor started speaking, painting my father as a pillar of community and family. My throat tightened, not from grief, but from how easily a lie can sound like the truth when everyone agrees to it. I remembered being 9, sitting on the steps of that very church, waiting for him to pick me up for the weekend. He never came. Mom said he had work. I learned later that he was just across town, with his real family. Aunt Meredith turned halfway during the service and gave me a look, like I was interrupting their perfect moment. I didn't cry, because I couldn't. Grief requires acknowledgement, and I hadn't been acknowledged in years. When the service ended, people filed out quietly. I stayed seated until everyone was gone. Then I walked up to the casket, touched the polished wood, and whispered, "I hope you see me now." The will reading was scheduled for the next morning. I didn't have a seat at the table, but I showed up anyway. The lawyer, Mr. Halpern, looked surprised, not upset, just unsure where to place me. Ethan and Jessica sat on one side of the long oak desk. Aunt Meredith sat near the window. I stood. Mr. Halpern cleared his throat and began Charles Carter's last will and testament. His voice faded for me. All I could hear was the rhythm of my own breathing. In, out. Then came the line, all properties, investments, and assets shall be divided equally between his 2 children, Ethan Carter and Jessica Carter. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I didn't speak. Not yet. Aunt Meredith raised an eyebrow and said aloud, "Well, that's clear enough, isn't it, Mr.?" Halpern avoided my eyes. Jessica smirked. Ethan stared straight ahead. I finally stepped forward. "Is that the most recent version of the will?" I asked. Everyone looked at me like I had screamed. "Excuse me," Aunt Meredith snapped. I turned to Mr. Halpern. My name isn't in there at all. He hesitated. There's no mention of a Madison Carter in this document. Jessica laughed quietly, like it was all so predictable. You were never part of this family, she said. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. I wanted to speak, to scream, but I didn't, because part of me had known. Part of me had been preparing. So instead, I nodded, whispered a quiet thank you to Mr. Halpern, and left. They thought that was the end of it, but they didn't know. I wasn't done, not even close. I walked straight home from the lawyer's office. Not because I didn't have a car, but because I needed every second of that 15-block stretch to keep myself from collapsing. The cold air helped. The silence helped more. My boots scraped the sidewalk like sandpaper against my nerves. Every step reminded me I had been erased. Again. But this time, I wasn't going to disappear quietly. The moment I got back to my apartment, a cramped one-bedroom above a bookstore on Jefferson Street, I pulled out the box I'd kept in the closet for years. A plain shoebox, duct-taped and dusty. Inside memories, photos, letters, one blurry picture of me on Dad's lap when I was a toddler. A Father's Day card I'd made in 3rd grade, never mailed. A lock of his hair Mom had snipped from a barbershop floor when he wasn't looking. That was the key. I'd always wondered why she'd kept it. Now I knew. It took me a week to gather everything I needed. I went to the clinic discreetly, filled out forms, handed over the hair sample, and let the lab tech swab my cheek. No one knew. Not even my closest friend, Delilah. I didn't need sympathy. I needed truth. Every day after that, I went to work like normal. Waited tables at a local diner where the regulars called me sweetheart and tipped in coins. And every night, I came home, stared at my mailbox, and prayed. 6 weeks. That's how long it took. The envelope was plain. No logos. Just my name typed neatly across the front. My hands trembled as I opened it. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I sank to the floor. 99.9998% match. Paternal relationship confirmed. Charles Carter was my biological father. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't delusional. I wasn't nothing. For the first time in years, I felt a heat in my chest that wasn't grief or shame. It was fire. Pure, focused fire. I made 3 copies of the results. One I sealed and placed in my safe. One I kept in my purse at all times. And the third, well, that was for the judge. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I hired a lawyer of my own. Her name was Sharon Nguyen Sharp Eyes. Sharper voice. She looked at the test and said, "They're gonna wish they never opened that will." Together, we filed a motion to contest the estate. Attached the DNA results, a sworn affidavit from my mother, and even a notarized letter Dad had written to me years ago, back when he still called me Maddie. The court date was set. Family Court, Fayette County, 9 sharp. The night before the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, wore a simple black dress, tied my hair back. I didn't want to look vengeful. I wanted to look undeniable. I arrived early. The courtroom smelled like paper and dust, the kind of place where lies unravel, if you're lucky. They were all there when I walked in. Jessica, pretending she hadn't seen me. Ethan, trying to look bored, and Aunt Meredith smiling like she already won. My lawyer whispered, "Let them talk first." So I sat. The judge entered. We all rose. She had gray hair, stern eyes, and no patience for games. Ethan's lawyer began, "Your Honor, this woman has no legal standing." The deceased did not recognize her as his daughter. She was never listed in any official documents. Jessica chimed in, "She's not family. Our father told us that himself. She's just Someone from the past. Aunt Meredith added the final nail. Charles made it clear. He wanted nothing to do with her. Silence. The judge turned to me. Ms. Carter, do you have anything to say? I stood up slowly, walked forward, reached into my purse, and laid the document on the table. This is a certified DNA test, conducted by a licensed lab. It confirms with 99.9998% accuracy that Charles Carter is my biological father. The judge looked down, read the document, then looked up again. Her expression changed slightly, but unmistakably. Jessica gasped. Ethan's face turned red. Aunt Meredith leaned back like someone had slapped her. The judge spoke. We will take a recess. I need to verify this document with the clerk's office. I returned to my seat. Didn't smile. Didn't blink. Just breathed. 15 minutes passed. The judge returned. The court has verified the document's authenticity. Then she looked directly at the other side. Ms. Carter is, in fact, the biological daughter of Charles Carter. As such, she is legally entitled to contest the will and claim her share of the estate. Silence fell again. But this time, it wasn't cold. It was justice settling into the room. Jessica looked like she might cry. Ethan muttered something under his breath. Aunt Meredith stood up and barked, "This isn't over." The judge didn't even flinch. "It is for today." Court adjourned. As the gavel fell, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Seen, heard, valid. I stepped outside into the sunlight. Lexington looked different now. Or maybe I did. And this was only the beginning. The days after court felt like a strange kind of silence. Not peace, not relief. More like the quiet before a second storm. Because winning one round doesn't mean the war is over. Especially not with people like them. I thought the DNA results would end the fight, but I underestimated their pride and their cruelty. 3 days after the court ruling, I received a letter, no return address, just my name, scrawled in rushed handwriting. Inside was a note. Blood doesn't make you family. Stop pretending. There was no signature, but I knew who it was from. Jessica always preferred knives over bullets, slow, sharp, personal. I didn't tell my lawyer, didn't tell anyone, because I knew this wasn't something to be handled in court. This was deeper. They wanted to destroy me emotionally, since they couldn't erase me legally. But I'd survived worse. I poured my focus into the next step. Discovery phase. That's when we would review all estate documentation, will versions, financial transfers, and communications. And what we found changed everything. Turns out, there had been 2 wills. One from 3 years ago, and one just 6 months before Dad died. In the older one, my name was there, plain as day. Madison Carter, my daughter. I stared at the words for hours. He had tried. He had wanted me included. But the newer will, the one the court originally reviewed, was missing that line. In fact, it was suspiciously clean. Too clean. No mention of me at all. And oddly, no signature from the notary on file. That was the crack. And Sharon, my lawyer, hammered it wide open. We subpoenaed the notary listed on the second will. And what did he say under oath? He never notarized that document. Never even met Charles Carter. A forged will. Meredith. It had to be her. She had access. She knew the system. She'd done this before, helping clients rewrite their legacies. This time, she tried it on her own brother. We filed a fraud complaint immediately. Suddenly, the quiet storm turned into thunder. Meredith was called to court for deposition. She came dressed like a grieving St. Pearls. Gray silk, trembling hands. But when the judge asked her to explain the missing notary, her mask cracked. She stammered, claimed clerical error, claimed Charles had a change of heart, claimed everything except the truth. But truth has a way of surfacing, especially when you're not prepared for it. We submitted handwriting analysis comparing Dad's actual signature to the forged one on the second will. A perfect match, no. Similar enough to fool most people. Yes, but not the experts. Verdict forgery confirmed. The court nullified the second will entirely, which meant the previous version where I was named became the standing legal document. For the first time, I had more than just DNA. I had legal recognition. And with it came something else: control. Because that version didn't just name me, it named me executor. Executor of Charles Carter's estate. I sat in the same office where I'd once been denied a seat. But this time, I was at the head of the table. Ethan refused to look at me. Jessica whispered, "This is a joke." I didn't reply. "Just read from the paper, effective immediately. All pending sales and transfers of property are suspended until full review." They gasped, because they had been trying to sell the Lexington house, my father's house, without waiting for probate, without permission. It was over now. I had the keys. I had the authority. And I had no reason to protect them anymore. I reviewed every transaction, every withdrawal, every check Meredith had written in Dad's name the month before his death. And what I found was theft. Tens of thousands siphoned, filed under estate maintenance, transferred to Meredith's private account. Sharon and I handed it to the judge, along with a quiet statement. "We are not seeking criminal charges yet, but restitution is required." The judge agreed. Meredith was forced to return the funds. Ethan and Jessica lost all decision-making power. And me, I moved into the Lexington house. The front porch still creaked. The wallpaper was still faded. But it was mine now. I stood in the center of the living room, where family portraits used to hang, and whispered, "I'm home. Dad. Finally." But this story wasn't over yet, because blood may not make family. But truth. Truth burns through every lie you ever told. I lived in that house alone for 2 weeks. No visitors, no calls, just me, silence, and the echo of things I'd never been allowed to have. Some nights, I wandered the halls with a candle, not because the lights were out, but because I wanted to feel the weight of every creak in the floorboards. I wanted to reclaim each inch of that place, not just as a house, but as proof I had belonged all along. But the silence didn't last. One morning, a knock came at the front door, not aggressive, not gentle, just expectant. I opened it to find Ethan, suit jacket off, tie loosened, holding a manila envelope. "This isn't right," he said. "You know it." I didn't move. Didn't invite him in. "You mean the fraud or the decades of denial?" He looked tired. Older. Like the truth had aged him faster than time ever could. "Dad didn't raise you. You weren't in the photos. You weren't here." I stepped forward, because I wasn't allowed to be. He flinched, but said nothing. I could have slammed the door then. But instead, I waited. Ethan handed me the envelope. "Jessica wants to settle. She says you should have never been named executor, that Dad was manipulated." I stared at the envelope, didn't touch it. Jessica forged a will. Meredith siphoned estate money. I'm the only one in this house not hiding something. He looked down at his shoes, like maybe for the first time. He was seeing the dirt on them. "We weren't trying to erase you," he said. "No, you stood by and let them do it. That's the same thing." He turned without another word and walked back to his car. I didn't open the envelope. I burned it. I wasn't interested in half-truths passed in Manila. I wanted justice, not compromise. The next day, Meredith filed a motion to appeal the decision, claimed undue influence, emotional manipulation. Even suggested I bribe the notary, but the judge had seen enough. The appeal was denied within 2 weeks. Her credibility had collapsed like a wet paper roof. So she turned to the only thing she had left public opinion. Articles began to surface. Anonymous blog posts, social media whispers, illegitimate daughter steals family fortune, gold digger claims inheritance through shady DNA test. My name trended, my inbox filled with threats. But I didn't waver, because they didn't know what I knew. Dad had left me something else, something they hadn't found. A letter, tucked behind the dresser in his study, dated just 3 weeks before his death. It was addressed to me, Maddie. If you're reading this, it means I didn't fix things fast enough. And for that, I'm sorry. I let others decide what kind of father I was allowed to be. But I see you. I've always seen you. Forgive me for the years I missed. I hope this house gives you more than I ever could. Love, Dad. I read it 12 times. Not because I needed reassurance, but because I needed to feel what it was like to be chosen, to be claimed. I scanned the letter, made copies, filed it with the estate, and then I did something no one expected. I hosted a memorial. Not for the family, for the truth. I opened the Lexington house to the community, neighbors, former colleagues, old friends of Dad's. I stood by the fireplace and read the letter aloud, not to prove anything, but to break the silence. When I finished, a woman approached me. She looked to be in her 60s, soft eyes, familiar smile. I used to know your mother, she said. She brought you to the clinic once. I remember you clung to her like a little shadow. I blinked. You remember me? Of course, she said. Charles asked about you more than once. He just didn't know how to step up. That night, for the first time, I cried. Not from pain, but from release. Because the hardest part of erasure isn't being cut out. It's convincing yourself you were never there to begin with. But I had been. I was. The next morning, I took down the portraits in the hallway, all the ones that had excluded me, and in their place, I hung a single frame, a photo of me at 5 years old, sitting on Dad's lap, his hand resting protectively on my shoulder. It had always been there. The truth. Waiting. And now it had a wall, a name, and a voice that no one could silence again. Weeks passed. The house settled. I settled. And for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to imagine a future without needing permission to exist in it. I started small. Fresh paint in the kitchen. Fixed the broken step on the porch. Cleared out the attic that hadn't been touched since the 90s. Every nail I hammered, every board I sanded, it felt like I was rewriting history, one act of care at a time. But healing doesn't mean forgetting, and peace doesn't mean absence of pain. One afternoon, I found a forgotten key behind the baseboard heater in the study. Old brass, worn smooth. It didn't match any door in the house. So I did what I always did when faced with a mystery. I searched. It took me 3 hours. But finally, in the garage, beneath a stack of cracked toolboxes, I found it. A locked trunk. My hand shook as I turned the key. It opened with a heavy click. Inside journals, dozens of them, all written by my father. The first entry was dated the year I was born. Saw her again today. Madison. She has her mother's fire. I sat on the garage floor for hours, reading, laughing, crying. Sometimes just staring at the ink as if willing it to speak louder. He hadn't been absent. He had been ashamed, and in that shame, he became silent. But these pages told me everything he never had the courage to say aloud. He bought me a birthday gift every year, kept them wrapped, in the attic. There were 19 of them, still in their boxes. I opened one, a small blue velvet box. Inside a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, the letter M. He never forgot me. He just didn't know how to face the consequences of letting others shape our story. But now, I held the narrative, and I was ready to use it. A month later, I published the journals, not for profit, for clarity. I worked with a small local press, kept the distribution limited. The title was Simple Letters from the Quiet Father. The reaction was immediate. Some praised it, others called it manipulative. But I didn't care, because it existed. It was real. And real was all I'd ever wanted. The book reached people I never expected. Former students of Dad's, who wrote to say they had no idea he carried that guilt. Mothers, who thanked me for telling the story their daughters couldn't. Even Ethan. He showed up again. No envelope this time. Just him. And an apology that took 10 minutes to form. I read it. He said, the book, the journals. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I said. He nodded. Maybe, but I'm trying now. I let him in. We sat in the same kitchen where I used to imagine what it might be like to be loved by a family that never claimed me. Now, I didn't need imagining. I had truth and a name. We didn't hug, we didn't cry, but he helped me change a light bulb. And somehow, that was enough. Jessica never showed up again. The last I heard, she'd moved to Florida, started over, or tried to. Meredith faced a fine and a quiet public shame. And while part of me wanted more, wanted justice with teeth, I realized something. Sometimes, silence isn't surrender, it's elevation. Because when you've been dismissed your whole life, speaking with calm certainty is the loudest sound in the room. I now teach at a local community college. Literature, of course. I tell my students stories save us, even when people try to bury them, especially then. And at the end of every semester, I bring them to the house. I let them walk the halls, see the frame on the wall with the little girl and her father. And I say, truth lives here. Not perfectly, not easily, but fully. And that's what I became. Not a mistake. Not a footnote. Not a family secret. But a full chapter. Signed. Stamped. And impossible to erase.